Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to paint this watercolor using some very special paints that were sent to me from a viewer. So thank you so much, Patti, for sharing your Michael Harding watercolors with me. Now, she was sent an accidental tube of moss, Michael Harding's watercolor, and since she doesn't use heavy metals, she thought it'd be a shame for the paint to go to waste, so she offered it to me, and then she made me a palette with the other tubes that she bought. So I've got a really pretty assortment of colors here, and these 5 colors are very almost twilight-y colors, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to paint with another set of watercolors today, and I came across this beautiful landscape on Unsplash, and generally it wouldn't be something that would catch my eye, but I thought, you know what, that would be so perfect with these Michael Harding watercolors, since they have that really cool purple to green undertone. It's just such a nice analogous color scheme, and I thought it would work really well. Plus, the sky was so beautiful in this paint in the photograph. I thought it would be really fun to give it a try. And I'll have a link to that in the video description to Unsplash if you want to paint along and find that reference photo. I did speed this up a little bit so it wouldn't take too long. I didn't live narrate this because I was just enjoying playing with these paints. I'd never really used them before other than swatching, and I wanted to see how they flowed on the paper, how they mixed, and all of that. Now, that yellow ochre was actually left over on my palette, and I think it might actually be Da Vinci yellow ochre gouache. I'm not 100% sure, but I did want a little bit of a warmer yellow for the sky, so I just nabbed that right up. So there is a smidgen of yellow ochre and a smidgen of burnt sienna in this painting that wasn't from that that palette, but still, it's like 95% the Michael Harding colors. They're really lovely. You can see from my swatch there that they are extremely sheer and transparent, and I didn't get mud even though the colors were mixed pigment colors. So I'll just kind of go over the colors that are here. We've got Prussian blue. Now that is a single pigment color, PB27. We have moss, which is a mixture of nickel azu yellow, PY150, PB29, which is ultramarine blue. I don't think it has too much of that, and also it's got PR209, so I only think there's just a touch of those other 2 colors because it is very much that green gold type of color. There's also Amethyst, which is a mixture of PR122, which is magenta, and PB29, which is ultramarine blue. Again, it does feel to be mostly magenta, very little ultramarine blue. And then we've got Hooker's Green, which is a combination of PG36, which is phthalo green yellow shade, PR101, which is an iron oxide brown, and PY180, which I am not very familiar with, I have to say. But these colors were so transparent that I didn't end up with any mud, and they also all have cooler undertones, and whenever you have colors with cool undertones, they tend to be more transparent, and they also tend to make mud less. So if you're picking a selected, like a small number for a limited palette, if you choose colors that are cooler in undertone, meaning they lean more to their cooler color friends on the color wheel, then you're going to end up with a color set generally that's going to mix a little bit cleaner. So just kind of a heads up if you are trying to maybe make a tiny little Locket watercolor palette or something like that, which is a tutorial I'm thinking about coming up with because I've made so many locket and little bracelet and little tiny itty bitty palettes in the past, and I've got a couple other little lockets I want to fill with paint, so let me know if you're interested in that idea in the comments below. I'm really just taking it easy with this painting. I did the soft blending in the sky, I'm doing some soft blending in the water, and actually in a moment here I'm going to have to stop filming so that I can let my dog out and the paper started to dry. So here I'm doing this wet into wet, but then my dog was barking. I didn't know if somebody was at the door or what, so I left my painting to go see, and my paper was completely dry when I returned. So I'm using a fine mist sprayer, and I just gave my paper a mist, and that did a great job at making the paper damp again so I can continue on with that reflection in the water. And you can get those fine mist sprayers on Amazon. You can buy them at any probably any beauty supply store as well. They're just a very fine continuous mist spray. I'll try to remember to link the one that I bought on Amazon in the video description. It was only like $6, I think, very affordable, and I've been using it for a couple of years. I haven't had any problems, although I have heard some people say that it's good to use distilled water with it. I'll tell you what I do. I'm a heavy tea drinker, so I always have, and I use a tea kettle, like an electric kettle, so there's always water in the kettle, so I always just put water that has previously been boiled and cooled into my spray bottle, and I've never had any mold issues, and it's never clogged. So I don't know, probably distilled water is best, but that works too, and I haven't had a problem. But I have well water. I don't know. All of our waters are different, I suppose. So I'm working kind of back to front in the land masses, and I'm doing the mountains that are far away, and they've got kind of a cool purpley blue undertone. And then I didn't want to have my the next layer bleed into that, so I'm going to the fronter, the area that's in front, the fronter. It's been a long day. I'm going to the area that is in the front of the painting here and painting those warmer toned mountains. They've got a little bit of the yellow ochre and the burnt sienna in them. And I'm also getting some of that beautiful hooker's green, but I'm mixing it in with the moss to just kind of warm it up a little bit more. And these colors are spectacular. They're beautiful. You might have a heart attack when you see how much they are. I guess it totally depends on where you're buying. You're probably not going to be paying full MSRP online, but Michael Harding is known for expensive paints. He had an oil line, I think he still does, previous, and I didn't even look because it's like I'm not going to the Cadillac dealership because, you know, I've got a Toyota budget, so I don't even look sometimes. But they are an exquisite high-end paint. And I'm pretty sure Blick has them. You probably can get them pretty much anywhere now. It's a pretty popular range. And I would not mind picking some up at some point, but I have so much paint to work through, so I don't know. If I was to do a legit review of these, I probably would want to pick up the basic colors I use most often, just so I could have an apples to apples type of comparison. But I've got so many tubes of ultramarine blue and quinacridone rose and Hansa yellow light and all the colors that I use all the time, and yellow ochre and whatnot, that it's like, oh, it's kind of hard to justify. I feel like I should be painting a lot more to use up some of the things that I've already bought to review. But this was such a treat and so fun to play with. And Patti, thank you so much for thinking of me and sharing your stash. I do appreciate that. So I'm just kind of blending on this like section of mountain here. It's very shadowy in there. And I'm not putting the picture up on screen because I'd have to make it pretty small. I wanted the palette to show. That palette is from an Etsy shop. And I'll link that down below as well. He makes beautiful handmade palettes. I think he's like a high school art teacher actually. And it's what I use often for gouache what I used to use before I got my big gouache palette set up. Like if I'm just testing out colors and whatnot, that's why there's like 3 colors in the corner, because they were the Da Vinci gouache, and Da Vinci gouache just dries so well in a palette and reactivates so well. It's almost like it's like their watercolors, but they don't swatch out exactly the same as the watercolors, but they act a lot like watercolors. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I'll try to remember to link to everything I used. I didn't use too many things. Oh, and the brushes I'm using actually are synthetic brushes from Balique. I might not be pronouncing that right, but they may be private labeled Art Secret brushes. I'm not sure, but they're wonderful. I purchased some of their travel brushes, I think it was last fall, and they have such a razor sharp point. They're really lovely. And the owners saw my review and offered to send me that set of brushes. They actually offered a bunch of other brushes because they do a lot of animal fur brushes, but I said, no, I don't use animal fur brushes. So they sent me these synthetics to try. And this little set that I'm pulling the brushes from works really nice. I used the big flat one to wet the paper, and I find all the brushes to have a really good response. I've only been using them for a couple of months, so I haven't really put them through a lot of wear and tear, but I did use them through World Watercolor Month a lot when I was painting outside on my back deck. So I got to use them a lot, and I haven't had any of them wear down or get frizzy or anything. And I do paint on a pretty rough cotton watercolor paper often, so like an Arches paper or something very similar. So I mean, I think they're going to hold up really well. And now on the dry paper in the water there, I am adding some like kind of more reflections, more ripples in the water. It really seemed to shift when it dried. Like it got a lot lighter, it seemed like, and duller. And so I don't know if that's the paint or that's the Bao Hong Academy paint paper I'm working on. It's actually the Meeden watercolor paper, which I'm like 95% sure is like the Bao Hong Academy paper. It works great. And it's really nice for these smaller sketches. This is the cold press finish, and it's 5 inches by 7 inches. You could probably count the squares on my mat there, but it's a nice size when you're just kind of feeling like you don't really know what you want to paint. You want to paint something, but you just kind of, you don't want to commit to a larger sheet of paper. And that's how I was feeling today. And it was great to test watercolors that I hadn't used before, because you never quite know how, especially a strange combination of colors that you typically wouldn't have in like a standard palette. It's kind of nice to work on something a little bit smaller so that you're not kind of getting in over your head, I suppose. And I notice sometimes I lose steam on landscapes unless I'm out painting in plein air, and I honestly I'm usually painting in a sketchbook that's about this size, so that works out pretty well. I tend to really enjoy landscapes painted in plein air, not so much working from photographs, but I thought this would be really fun, and people love to paint landscapes, and if this encourages people to paint along, then I think that's great. This is sped up 3 times, so just to kind of give you a heads up, this took me around 45 minutes. So I don't want you to think that, oh my gosh, you painted this in 20 minutes, and no, painted it in 45 minutes. So just kind of keep that in mind. I don't want you to feel like you need to be rushing. Take your time. I took my time on this. Took my time and had a great time. I just don't want to hear myself talk for 45 minutes, and I figure you probably don't either. You'd rather just get to painting, see how it's done, and then go get to painting. And I totally get that. Now I'm adding in some ripples, and I just watered down I think I used the phthalo blue and some of the Prussian blue. I'm just basically doing a lot of palette mixing, letting the colors cross-pollinate with each other so nothing gets discordant, and doing what I can with those colors plus the dregs that were left in my palette from a previous review. And it was a lot of fun, and I'm really happy with how it came out. Now, when I go back and look at it, I'm always a little bit extra critical, because it's like, well, I really don't have that much detail there. Really is not a lot going on. But in the reference photo, it is a very simple scene. So don't be intimidated. Give it a try. If you don't want to put the detail of the snow in the mountains, you don't have to. Or if you want to go back in with some white gouache and get that snow in, you can. I actually went in with a little bit of white at the end, which you'll see coming up, because I didn't have the shimmer on the water as well as I wanted, where the water hits the shore and where the break in the sky and in between the two land areas are coming in, the two like inlets are coming in. So I decided I wanted to brighten that up a bit. So there's, get your painting to how you want it to look. It's, it's great to limit your palette and use fewer colors and not use white if that's what you want to do. But if you're not happy with your painting, leaving it without those highlights on it just so you can say it's a pure watercolor or traditional watercolor, but you're not happy with it, I don't see much point in that personally. Obviously, you do whatever you want to do, but that's just my take on it. Coming from somebody who was steeped in traditional watercolor, painted that way for decades, and then decided to mix media it up all the time, whatever. Now I'm adding in some darker, more contrasty shadows, and I'm basically mixing. I took the Hooker's green and the Amethyst color, which is that magenta color, and mix those together, and they cancel each other out, neutralize, and they get really dark. You can also do the like the Prussian blue and the magenta if you want a deep, deep purple, but that can look a little strange. I did try that, and it's like, ooh, that looks a little weird. Even though we have a lot of purple here, that looked a little weird in the trees. It needed to be a little bit warmer. And also your warmer tones are going to advance, and they're going to give you a little more depth if you have those warmer tones in the foreground and you have the cooler tones in the background, and that will help give you a little bit more expanse in your painting, especially something small like this. This would be ideal to paint on a greeting card, like if you wanted to tape down a watercolor greeting card, make it a nice border, give it a nice border with some tape, paint it, and then mail it off. That's such a pretty card, such a great way to practice painting on those watercolor greeting cards. After I let it dry, I decided to come back and take another look, and I thought, oh, I'd like to have some more detail in those mountains, and so I switched brushes. That's what I do. I do that sometimes when I feel like my brush strokes are all getting very samey and I don't have enough variety in the painting, so I went with this little angled brush that was in that kit. All the brushes I'm using are from that Balik kit. I think they're on Amazon. I think they're available on Amazon. They have their own website too, so if not, you can find their website if that's easier for you. And if you're not in, if I don't know, you don't have Amazon, you don't like to shop at Amazon, search it. I'm sure you can find it on other platforms as well. But yeah, I just grabbed different brushes from this, and I found it very easy to get a variety of looks with that. And plus, I feel like a flat brush does well for like craggy rocks and mountains, and also ripples in the water. A flat brush will work really well for that. So If you feel like your ripples, when you paint your ripples or your sheen in the water, if you feel like they get a little cupped or a little curved, try using a flat brush because you'll automatically make more horizontal strokes if you've got that chisel edge to work from. So, make it easier on yourself. There's a reason why we have this variety of brushes to work from, why we have different shapes. It's because it's going to push the paint around differently. It's going to give you a different edge. It's going to give you more detail, or it's going to hold more paint. They all have different reasons for being. So use them, experiment, and see what you like best. I find I like different brushes more in different mediums. Like if I'm painting with gouache, I'm going to use a lot of flats and a lot of filberts. If I'm painting with watercolor, I'm going to use a lot of rounds, maybe larger flats. If I'm painting in oils, I'm going to use probably more flats, but then I'll even use tiny, really soft brushes for details. And in fact, when I've worn down a watercolor brush, I will put it in my oil painting stash because the oils will slick the bristles back together so I can use them for detail again. And I am due to go through my most heavily used watercolor brushes and weed some out because I've noticed a few really ones that have been sanded down by the old Arches paper. So here I'm using the bleed proof white, adding just a little shimmer on the water. I think that really adds a lot and makes the water look more glassy. So yeah, the bleed proof white is probably my favorite white gouache as far as, working in all medias. It lasts an age, and if it starts to go dry in the container, just add a little water. I spray it from my spray bottle that I boiled, the water that I boiled. So I know there's no baddies, no bugs or bacteria or anything in there. I know it's going to be fine. So I've been using that jar for about 6 years and it's still fine. Maybe longer. I don't even know. Probably even longer. And I had some highlights that seemed a little too cold, so I added a little yellow ochre to the white to warm them up a little bit. So that's something you can do too. If your white is a little too cold, you can warm it up. And there you have it. There is the finished painting. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you give it a try soon. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Until next time, happy crafting. Bye.